The Texas sun blazed down, but it was the flashing lights and drawn guns that set my blood boiling. I stood rooted in the heart of my own ranch, hands raised, the dry wind kicking dust across my boots, my pulse hammering not from fear, but from a righteous fury burning deep. "Get on the ground," one of them shouted, a tall guy with a cheap badge dangling from his belt, barking like I was some outlaw. "You're under arrest for violating community safety codes and resisting HOA jurisdiction. HOA jurisdiction." The words hit like a bad joke. Another officer reached for his handcuffs, but I didn't budge. I locked eyes with the leader and asked, cool as steel, "Who sent you?" "HOA Compliance Task Force." He snapped, puffing up like he was the law itself, "This is your last warning." I squinted at the crooked patch on his sleeve. "Community Enforcement Division, a department as real as a mirage in this state. Did they really think they could waltz onto my land, play cop, and arrest me? Me, Gregory Miles, former Attorney General of Texas." I leaned in, voice low and steady. "You boys are either real brave or real stupid." Just as one moved to grab me, a black SUV roared down my driveway, tires spitting gravel and dust like a storm rolling in. That's when the whole scene flipped, upside down. Let me take you back. I'm Greg Miles, folks round here. Just call me Greg. After 2 decades serving as Texas's Attorney General, I bought this ranch to trade politics for peace, to share quiet days with my wife, Linda, few cows, some chickens, and 40 acres of freedom. At least, it was freedom until the HOA decided I was their personal problem. Which city in the United States are you watching from? Drop a comment and share with us if you've had any run-ins with an HOA. We'd love to narrate your story on our channel. Now, I don't live inside any HOA zone. That's the first thing you should know. My ranch is part of their community. Never signed up, never paid dues, never agreed to their rules. But that didn't stop the Oak Hollow HOA board, especially their president, Deborah Cartwright, from trying to throw their weight around like they owned the whole county. Deborah is your classic HOA Karen, early 50s platinum blonde, sharp red lipstick, and a voice that could peel paint off a wall. She walks like she's marching in a parade and talks like she's auditioning for Judge Judy. And for some reason, she hated that I didn't contribute to the uniform image of the neighborhood. Mind you, I live a mile outside their neighborhood, but that didn't matter to her. According to Deborah, my ranch was visible from the HOA line, and my red barn didn't match the neutral aesthetic of the area. Her words, not mine. At first, it started with letters. Dozens of them, some certified, some slid under the gate, all demanding I correct violations. Then came the fines. $500 for unregistered fencing. $300 for improper livestock placement. I laughed and threw them in the fireplace. Then came the threats. Deborah and her little army of clipboard warriors, people like Ken Walters, the nosy vice president, and Sharon Mace, their so-called security chair, showed up at my gate demanding a compliance inspection. I told them they were trespassing and advised them to leave before I called the sheriff. They didn't take that well. One afternoon, I saw Sharon with a pair of binoculars from across the road writing in a little notebook. I stood at my gate and waved. She sped off like she'd seen a ghost. But I knew something bigger was brewing. You don't push people like Deborah without them scheming behind the scenes. And sure enough, a few days later, I saw strange cars parked by the main road. Dark-tinted windows, engine running, watching, waiting. Then came the official notices from a so-called Community Enforcement Division, complete with fake badges and phony citations. I could smell the nonsense a mile away. Still, I gave them enough rope to hang themselves with. I didn't react. I didn't send cease and desist letters. I waited until this morning. It was just past 8 a.m. I was out feeding the chickens when I heard engines revving down my private road. A black pickup truck and 2 Crown Victorias, like old police cruisers, pulled in fast, tires skidding over gravel. That's when it all kicked off. The fake officers jumped out like they were shooting an action movie. Flashing lights mounted on their dashboards, loudspeakers blaring something about compliance arrest orders, and that ridiculous guy with a megaphone yelling about HOA jurisdiction. My wife Linda ran out from the porch yelling, "Greg, what's happening?" I raised a hand to calm her. "Stay inside," I said. "They're not real cops," she gasped. "Are they dangerous?" "Maybe," I answered, "but they don't know who they're messing with." They stormed toward me like a SWAT team. I didn't move. I wanted to see just how far they'd take it. One of them tried to shove me to the ground. That's when I spoke the words that made their faces twist in confusion. "You are violating at least 7 state and federal laws right now," I said coolly. "And I should know. I helped write them." That's when I saw one of them hesitate, but the other just shouted, "Shut up and comply." I could feel the heat rising in my chest. Not fear, not even anger, but pure legal fury. These people were impersonating officers, trespassing, and threatening arrest without any legal power. And just as one of them reached to handcuff me, a black SUV came tearing up the driveway. Its engine roared, tires screeching to a stop, and the door flung open. A man stepped out in full sheriff uniform, his badge gleaming in the sun. And what happened next? Well, let's just say they weren't expecting him to show up. Hey folks, if you're still reading this, let me know where you're watching from. Are HOAs as wild in your area, too? You're about to meet the sheriff, the one man who had my back through all this. And trust me, this story is just getting started. The sheriff slammed his car door shut with force, the echo of it bouncing off the hills behind my ranch. Dust swirled around his boots as he marched straight toward us, not breaking stride even once. His eyes locked onto the so-called officers trying to arrest me. "Drop the cuffs," he barked. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the kind of authority that made you freeze on instinct. The one closest to me turned startled. "Sir, this is HOA business. We're performing a lawful compliance arrest." The sheriff pulled out his badge, held it high, and stepped nose to nose with him. "You're performing what now?" I couldn't help but smirk. The sheriff's name is Eli Donovan, and he's not only the head lawman for this county, he's an old friend. We worked together back when I was attorney general. I helped him get elected when he was just starting out, and we've been on each other's Christmas card list ever since. But today, Eli wasn't here for small talk badge. Now, he ordered the imposter. The fake officer hesitated. You could see the panic rise in his eyes as he fumbled with the clip. Eli snatched it from his shirt and turned it over in his hand, squinting at the ridiculous Community Enforcement Division seal. Eli raised an eyebrow. "This isn't even laminated, right? Where'd you get this?" "A cereal box." Another one of the fake officers tried to walk away, but Eli turned sharply. "Nobody leaves. Everyone stays put." He tapped his radio. "Dispatch, I need backup at the Miles Ranch. 3 suspects impersonating law enforcement, possibly armed. Send." 2 cruisers. The one holding the cuffs dropped them instantly. I looked at the men standing frozen on my land, suddenly realizing their little HOA stunt had backfired in the worst way. "You done now?" I asked them, arms crossed. None of them answered. Linda stepped out cautiously from the house, phone in her hand. "Greg, do you need me to record this?" Eli waved her over. "Already got the dash cam running, Mum, but a few extra videos from your porch wouldn't hurt." She lifted her phone and hit record. Meanwhile, Deborah Cartwright, queen of the HOA, stood at the edge of the road in her silver Lexus, watching the chaos unfold through her oversized sunglasses. When our eyes met, she didn't blink. She just started her car like nothing happened, and turned around to drive off. But she made one mistake. She forgot. I don't forget. The investigation started that same afternoon. Turns out the 3 men had been hired by a private neighborhood enforcement committee, which was just a fancy way of saying Deborah and her HOA board made it up. They had used HOA funds to rent old police cruisers, buy fake uniforms, and print fake arrest orders. They even wrote up a community warrant for me. Let that sink in. A fake arrest warrant written by an HOA. Now Eli was as furious as I'd ever seen him. He had the men cuffed and stuffed in his cruiser within 30 minutes. Their rights were read, their IDs checked and background reports pulled. One of them, the loud one, had a record for impersonating a security officer in another county. Another had a history of harassment complaints, and the third was Deborah's nephew. Classic. That night, I sat on the porch with Linda sipping lemonade, staring out over the fields. I should have known Deborah would try something like this, I said. Linda nodded. She's bold and desperate. But she doesn't know what you're capable of, Greg. I thought about it in silence. I wasn't afraid of her or her little army of clipboard carrying goons, but what made me angry was how far they were willing to go. Faking a police arrest. That wasn't just annoying, it was dangerous. What if I hadn't kept calm? What if I had reached for my phone and they panicked? This wasn't just about some HOA nonsense anymore. It was war. The next morning, I drove into town to speak with my attorney. Sarah Keene, a brilliant, nonsense woman in her late 30s who used to work with me at the Capitol. She read over the reports and raised an eyebrow. Greg, they tried to arrest you right on my ranch. She sat back and blew out a low whistle. This is a criminal conspiracy minimum. You've got impersonation, false detainment, misuse of HOA funds, possible mail fraud with those fake citations. I smiled. That's why I came to you. I'll file for a restraining order today, she said. And I'll request a cease and desist for every member of that board. But I need to know, do you want to go public with this? I paused. Going public meant news vans on my driveway. It meant reporters asking questions, digging into HOA records, showing Deborah's face all over the news. It would bring pressure. It would bring shame. But more than that, it would bring accountability. I gave her a nod. Let's do it. Less than 48 hours later, the local news ran the headline. Retired Attorney General nearly arrested by fake HOA cops. Investigation underway, and the firestorm began. Deborah tried to deny it at first, of course, claimed the men were contracted enforcement agents and that I overreacted, but the sheriff had already released the footage, the phony badge, the SUV dash cam, the fake warrant. Her denial crumbled like dry toast. The community was outraged. Even people in the actual HOA neighborhood started demanding answers. Some of them didn't even know they were paying HOA dues for things like compliance task forces. A petition started to recall Deborah and half the board. Others called for a full audit. HOA meetings turned into shouting matches. But Deborah wasn't done. She had one more card to play. That Sunday, I was walking the fence line, checking for a break in the north section, when I saw something strange near the creek. It looked like trash at first, sheets of paper weighed down by rocks. I walked closer. My heart dropped. They were printed flyers, hundreds of them, all over my property. Each one had my face on it, a poorly photoshopped mugshot, and the words dangerous criminal, HOA violator, do not approach. They were trying to smear me. Even worse, they had the HOA logo on them. That's when I knew this wasn't just about property lines anymore. This was personal, and I wasn't going to play defense anymore. I was going to strike back hard. The next morning, I took one of the flyers and laid it flat on my kitchen table. Linda stood over my shoulder, arms folded, jaw clenched. She didn't say a word, but the fire in her eyes said enough. This wasn't just HOA foolishness anymore. This was defamation. It was trespassing. It was targeted harassment. They hadn't just posted these flyers in the public park or on telephone poles. No, they crossed onto my land and scattered them by the hundreds. That meant they'd broken the fence, entered my private property in the dead of night, and walked nearly a half-mile to the creek, us to dump propaganda. Linda finally spoke, voice cold and sharp. They're trying to make people afraid of you. Not afraid, I said. They want to isolate me. shame me, make the HOA members too scared to stand with me. But I wasn't going to let them. I folded the flyer and slipped it into a folder. Let's go, I told Linda. Time to light a fire under some legal seats. By noon, I was sitting in Sarah Keene's office again. She scanned the flyer and looked up at me, stunned. They made these. They printed them and dumped them on my land. I confirmed they used the HOA logo, and you can tell from the photo they pulled that from the sheriff's dash cam. Sarah didn't waste a second. This just turned into a full-blown lawsuit. You've got grounds for defamation, harassment, unlawful entry, and misuse of state property if they access police footage. I leaned forward. I want to go for the throat. Sarah, and not just Deborah. I want everyone who approved this mess exposed and dragged into daylight. She nodded. Then we'll file motions this week. I'll have subpoenas ready for their emails and board meeting minutes, and I'll call a press conference. I grinned. Perfect. That night, while Sarah drafted her press statement, I called Sheriff Eli. You said one of those guys was Deborah's nephew. Right. Yep. Name's Tanner Cartwright. Got a slap on the wrist charge 2 years ago for trying to impersonate mall security. Deborah vouched for him, told the court he was passionate about community order. I shook my head. You think he was the one who organized the phony flyers? Wouldn't be surprised, but you didn't hear it from me? Greg, there's talk Deborah's funneling HOA money into a private fund. Cash-only jobs, no receipts. Now that was interesting. Any chance we could confirm that? I asked. I'll see what I can legally shake loose, he said. But you should know Deborah's smart. She's been in HOA circles for decades. She knows how to cover her tracks. She made one mistake this time. Eli, what's that? She messed with someone who doesn't play politics anymore. She messed with me. 3 days later, Sarah held the press conference right outside the county courthouse. Reporters from every local channel showed up. Cameras rolled, microphones snapped on. She stood at the podium and delivered a flawless statement. My client, Gregory Miles, a retired attorney general, has been the target of unlawful intimidation and defamation by members of the Oak Hollow Homeowners Association. The actions taken against him, including impersonating law enforcement officers, distributing false criminal flyers, and unauthorized entry onto private land, are not only shameful, they are criminal. We are filing a civil suit for defamation, harassment, and property invasion, and we will be pursuing further action under state and federal statutes. The reporters exploded with questions. Cameras flashed. HOA residents watched from across the street, mouths agape. And Deborah, she was nowhere to be found, but she struck back fast. The very next morning, while Linda and I were having breakfast, I got a knock at the door. It was Ken Walters, the HOA's vice president. He was alone. No clipboard this time, just a tight smile and sweaty hands. Greg, he said nervously, I wanted to talk. Linda looked at him like he was a roach. I stepped outside. Talk fast. Ken, he cleared his throat. Look, this whole thing with Deborah, it's gotten out of hand. The board's not really on board anymore. We didn't know she was going to send fake cops or the flyers. She did that on her own. I stared at him. You signed off on the budget that paid for it. I didn't know what it was for, he blurted. She said it was for external compliance measures. That's all she said. And you didn't ask. She scares people, he whispered. I almost laughed. You're grown men and women. Ken, you let her scare you into breaking the law. He looked down at his shoes. I made a mistake. I came here to say I'm resigning from the board and I'm willing to testify. That got my attention. You're ready to go on record. Ken nodded. I already made a statement with the sheriff. I gave them copies of board emails. Deborah's been using HOA funds for months for personal stuff. Travel, dry cleaning, private investigators. It's bad, Greg. I crossed my arms. Then you better be ready to face what's coming next. He looked up pale and shaking. What is coming next? I didn't answer because at that exact moment, we both heard it. Sirens. A full convoy of sheriff vehicles sped past my ranch road and turned sharply down the main lane into Oak Hollow. Ken turned toward the sound. Is that? I nodded. It's time. Deborah Cartwright was about to have the worst day of her life. Sheriff feel I had a search warrant. The court had approved it overnight after Sarah presented the flyer evidence and the video footage. With Ken's testimony and the financial records Sarah's team pulled, they had more than enough. As the news crews followed the sheriff's cars, residents poured out into the street. Some started filming. Others just stood in silence as deputies entered the HOA office. Minutes later, Deborah was escorted out in handcuffs. Red lipstick, messy bun, sunglasses off, and no more smug smile. I watched it all unfold on the news from my living room. Linda sat beside me, holding my hand. And just when we thought the worst of it was over, Sarah called. You need to hear this, she said. The HOA board wasn't just attacking you, Greg. Deborah hired someone to investigate your past cases. Dig up dirt. Try to ruin your legacy. I leaned forward. Who? She hired an old contact of yours, one of the criminals you prosecuted in the past. He's out now and he wants revenge. My jaw tightened. Greg, she said slowly, they've made this personal on a whole new level. You're being followed. We have proof. Linda looked at me confused. What is it? She asked. I swallowed hard. Someone's targeting me, honey. Not just for land, but for who I used to be. And just like that, this fight turned deadly serious. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made me sit upright, a truck backfiring. In the distance, I reached for my rifle. Coyotes howling near the creek. I double-checked the motion sensors. Linda sat quietly at the window, clutching her robe tight, watching the moonlight spill across our land like it might carry shadows of danger. I wasn't scared for myself. I dealt with threats before. Politicians get death threats all the time, especially those who stand up to corruption. But this was different. They weren't just attacking my reputation anymore. They were threatening my home, my wife, my life, and they didn't care that I was a retired attorney general. By sunrise, Sheriff Eli was back on my ranch. He stood at the foot of my porch, his boots coated in dust, his face hard and unreadable. You were right, he said simply. We found the tracker. My heart dropped. Where? Under your truck, he said. Wired near the fuel line. Small military grade. Someone knew what they were doing. Linda gasped from behind the screen door. Someone's been watching us, she whispered. Eli nodded. We pulled the device and traced the frequency. It was transmitting to a burner laptop left on a ridge half a mile west of here. They used a solar-powered receiver and Wi-Fi booster. It's gone now, though. Burnt to ashes. Someone covered their tracks. I stepped off the porch and paced slowly. You think this was Deborah? No, Eli said. This wasn't her style. She's all drama and noise. This was quiet, clean, almost professional. Then who? He looked at me carefully. Sarah thinks it's Ronnie Chase. My blood froze. Ronnie Chase, the name alone brought a flood of memories. He was one of the dirtiest political fixers I ever prosecuted. Bribery, extortion, even attempted manslaughter. The man was a walking scandal. 10 years ago, I led the case that took him down. I thought he'd be in prison forever. I thought he was serving 25. I muttered. He was released last year. Eli said. Early parole, some technicality with evidence mishandling. Ironic considering who handled the case. I rubbed my face. You think Deborah hired him? She may have tried to smear you with flyers. But Ronnie, he's not here to smear. He's here to destroy. I stared out over the hills, past the rustling trees, and the cattle grazing in the distance. My sanctuary had turned into a hunting ground. I looked at Eli. Then we take the fight to them. Later that afternoon, Sarah arrived with thick folders, her eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. We have enough now to go federal, she announced. On what grounds? Organized harassment, misuse of association funds, defamation, stalking, and with Ronnie's involvement, it becomes a criminal conspiracy. Across state lines, I filed requests for a protective order, and I've alerted the DOJ. I sat across from her, digesting every word. Linda brought coffee, placing it gently beside me. Sarah flipped through the folder. Also, you'll love this. Deborah wasn't just misusing funds. She was also trying to force a reasons-owning vote to expand HOA control over neighboring lands, including yours. I slammed the table. She was trying to steal my ranch legally? She almost did, Sarah said, but her vote was forged, the signatures fake. We found at least 20 ballot entries from homeowners who'd moved away years ago. Linda's voice was quiet but firm. This woman belongs in jail. She will be, Sarah promised. But we didn't know that night would bring something worse. As the sun dipped below the horizon and shadows stretched across the land, I made one last sweep of the property. Everything was quiet to quiet. Then around 1 a.m., a loud bang echoed across the back pasture. I grabbed my rifle and flashlight and bolted outside. Linda followed with the emergency phone. I sprinted to the barn, heart racing, and there it was. The fence had been cut open, wires slashed, wooden posts splintered. My animals were panicked, mooing, clucking, running in circles, and spray-painted and thick red letters across the barn door were 4 words. You won't win, Greg. The paint dripped like blood. The message was clear. This wasn't HOA anymore. This was war. Eli arrived in 10 minutes. Backup came after. They dusted for prints. They set up trail cams. They placed motion sensors at every entry point. And Linda, she broke down in the kitchen, sobbing into her hands. I held her for what felt like hours. I wanted peace, Greg, she whispered. That's why we came here. Why can't they just leave us alone? I looked out the window toward the barn, jaw clenched. Because we stood up, because I didn't back down, because I made enemies in power who had no problem hiding behind HOA rules and fake cops. But they forgot the most important thing. I may be retired, but I'm still the law. And by the time I'm done, there won't be a corner left for them to hide. The next morning, I received an email. No sender, no subject line, just a video file. I opened it slowly. It showed Ronnie Chase sitting in a truck watching my ranch through binoculars. He turned to the camera and smiled. Then he said, "You took my life once, Greg. Now I'm taking yours one piece at a time." And that's when I knew this wasn't just about a fight. This was about survival. I stared at the screen, my jaw locked tight. That grin on Ronnie Chase's face, so smug, so deliberate. It was a message. He wasn't just some ghost from my past. He was back, alive, and hunting. Linda leaned over my shoulder. Her hand flew to her mouth the moment she saw the video. "Oh my God," she whispered. "That's him. That's the man." "I know," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Ronnie Chase, out of prison and playing games again." "But Greg," she said, trembling. "He was sitting right outside watching us." I grabbed my phone and called Eli. "Sheriff, we have video confirmation. Ronnie is on the property. He's stalking us and he's not even hiding it." "Send it to me," Eli said quickly. "Don't do anything reckless, Greg. Let's handle this the right way." "I'm not doing anything reckless," I said. "I'm doing what I should have done 10 years ago. Finish what I started." I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the porch with my rifle across my lap, my eyes trained on the treine. Linda dozed off beside me in a blanket, and even though the air was still in quiet, I knew it was only the calm before another storm. At 4:17 a.m., one of the new motion sensors near the west gate lit up. I didn't move. I waited. Then I saw it, just a flicker, a shadow darting behind the shed. I turned off the porch light, crouched low, and crept silently along the edge of the house. My boots made no sound against the gravel. I reached the shed and spun around the corner. Empty, but the gate had been opened and zip-tied to the fence post. It was a white envelope. I ripped it down and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with typed words, "Nice cameras, but you still miss me," and below it in neat, cold font, "I'm closer than you think." Eli arrived minutes later. "This guy's escalating," he muttered. "Leaving direct threats, taunting you on video, bypassing surveillance. He knows your property, Greg." I nodded grimly. He probably studied the layout from public land records, maybe even posed as a surveyor. "We're moving into federal jurisdiction now. I've already notified the FBI field office." But even that didn't ease my tension. I knew Ronnie. He was a master manipulator, always 3 steps ahead, and if he was truly closer than we thought, then he could strike anywhere. Eli placed officers at the end of my road. Linda and I upgraded our locks. I installed bulletproof glass on the front windows. And I told Sarah to double the security on my lawsuit filings. We were at war on 2 fronts now, one legal, one personal, and both were boiling. Meanwhile, the HOA board had completely fallen apart. Ken's resignation triggered a domino effect. Sharon quit next. 2 others followed. That left Deborah Cartwright, now under house arrest, gripping onto control with her last red nails. Then the audit results came in. Sarah walked into my living room holding the report like it was a nuclear code folder. "Greg, we found the transfer," she said. "What transfer?" $20,000. HOA funds wired to a private investigator. No name listed. Just a PO box in El Paso. "Let me guess," I said. "Ronnie Chase. We traced it to him within the hour." Sarah confirmed Deborah had paid Ronnie under the table with HOA money. She was funding a criminal to stalk a private citizen. That sealed it. With that, we filed a motion to dissolve the HOA's legal standing. By law, an HOA can be dismantled when there's provable fraud, misuse of funds, and risk to public safety. We had all 3. But just as the lawsuit gained national attention and the court date loomed, Ronnie struck again. This time he didn't come in silence. This time he left a bomb. It was disguised as a delivery package, plain brown box. No return label sitting neatly at the edge of my front porch like any Amazon order. "Linda saw it first, Greg," she said slowly. "Did you order anything?" I looked at the box and every hair on my neck stood up. "No," I whispered. We backed away instantly. I called Eli. He sent the bomb squad. They arrived in full gear within 20 minutes, sealed off the area, evacuated us, took the box to the edge of the pasture with a robot. The moment it opened, boom. A loud fiery blast shattered the early morning silence. Thankfully, the squad was ready. No one was hurt, but the message was clear. Ronnie didn't want to just scare me anymore. He wanted to end me. The news exploded. Former Attorney General targeted and failed bombing attack on Texas ranch. The Doge fast-tracked the investigation. Deborah Cartwright's name was plastered across every TV screen in the state. Reporters camped outside her gated home, shouting questions she refused to answer. But it didn't matter anymore. Sarah had what we needed, with sworn testimony from Ken, financial records, and now a confirmed domestic terror attempt linked to a hired criminal. We were ready for court. 2 nights before the hearing, I stood once more on my porch. Linda came out beside me. She wrapped her arm around mine and whispered, "Greg, promise me something. Anything. When this is over, we go back to peace. No more lawsuits, no more fights, just sunsets, chickens, laughter." I smiled. "You have my word." She nodded and leaned her head on my shoulder. Then a car pulled into the driveway, a sleek black sedan. The window rolled down slowly, and from inside, a voice called out, "Hey, Greg, remember me?" I froze. Linda's grip tightened on my arm. It was Ronnie. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was here, and this time he came in person. The porch light flickered in the wind as Ronnie Chase's face came into full view. That same smug, punchable face I remembered from the courtroom all those years ago. He hadn't aged much, just slicker, cockier, more dangerous. He had the nerve to smile as if this was some sort of twisted reunion. Linda stepped back instinctively, but I stood my ground. "You're trespassing," I said, voice low and steady. "And if you take one more step out of that car, you're leaving in an ambulance or a body bag." Ronnie raised both hands mockingly, still sitting in the driver's seat. "Relax, Greg. I just came to talk." "I don't talk to cowards," he chuckled. "You still got that edge." "Huh. I always admired that. Even when you ruined my life." I didn't answer. I didn't move. I just stared, my eyes locked on his every twitch. Ronnie continued, voice dripping with fake charm. "Look, man, the flyers, the surveillance, the scare tactics, it was business, nothing personal. Deborah made me a sweet offer to cause a little discomfort." "Discomfort," I barked. "You planted a bomb on my porch." He tilted his head. "You can't prove that." "Actually," I said, stepping forward, "we can. The casing survived the blast. And your fingerprints were on the delivery box. The FBI matched them this morning." For a split second, his grin faltered. And in that crack of his confidence, I saw the fear. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "You're going to drive off this property right now and turn yourself in, or the sheriff waiting down the road will drag you out of that car and slap you with federal terrorism charges." Silence. Then Ronnie said, "This isn't over." I took another step, my voice like iron. "Oh, it's over. You just don't realize it yet." He stared for one more second. Then, without another word, he reversed the car slowly, headlights sweeping across our yard, and disappeared into the darkness. Linda was shaking when I turned to her. "Is it really over?" she whispered. "No," I said. "But we're close." 2 days later, the courtroom was packed. It wasn't just a civil case anymore. It had grown into a multi-layered criminal investigation. The courtroom held more cameras than a Hollywood set. News crews outside were interviewing neighbors, former HOA board members, and legal experts. I stood at the plaintiff's table with Sarah beside me. Her notes were stacked neatly, her voice calm, but her eyes blazing. Across from us sat Deborah Cartwright, pale and tight-lipped, flanked by 2 attorneys who looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. Behind her sat the remnants of the old HOA board, now scattered, disorganized, and visibly embarrassed. And in a separate row, in cuffs and under guard, Ronnie Chase, the judge, entered. Everyone rose, and the trial began. Sarah's opening statement was surgical. She laid out every detail, the phony citations, the impersonation of law enforcement, the defamation flyers, the secret surveillance, and the bomb attempt. She named names, presented evidence, played the dash cam footage, showed the wire transfers, even played Ronnie's video threat for the court. The room went silent. The defense tried to object, but the judge shut it down. The evidence was overwhelming, and as each witness took the stand, Ken, Sharon, Eli, even Linda, the story became clearer. This wasn't just a dispute over HOA boundaries. This was a calculated criminal attack on a man who dared to say no to tyranny. And the audience, the jury, everyone felt it. By the time I took the stand, all I had to do was tell the truth. I spoke from the heart about how retirement was supposed to bring peace, about how standing up to bullying, whether from criminals or petty neighborhood tyrants, never ends, even after public office. And I looked Deborah straight in the eye as I said, "You tried to scare me, to control me. But what you didn't realize is I'm not afraid of people who hide behind fake power. I built my life fighting people like you." The jury didn't need long. Deborah was found guilty of conspiracy, fraud, defamation, and endangerment. Ronnie, he got slapped with federal charges, stalking, attempted bombing, conspiracy to commit murder. The judge dissolved the HOA under emergency judicial review. Oak Hollow's neighborhood governance was officially dismantled, and a court appointed. Trustee was assigned to restore any damages they caused. I won. But more than that, I proved something. You can't fake authority forever. 2 weeks later, life began to return to normal. The barn got repainted, the fences repaired, the animals calmed, and Linda finally began planting her sunflowers again. Sheriffville I dropped by with a bottle of bourbon and a smile. Her Chase got transferred to a max security facility in Montana. Good, I said. Let the mountains deal with him. Sarah called to say the civil suits for damages had also ruled in our favor. Over $1.2 million in compensations, mostly to be paid through Deborah's seized assets and HOA reserve accounts. And one morning, I found a note in my mailbox typed, no name, just 6 words. You brought justice. Thank you, Greg. Maybe it was from a neighbor. Maybe it was from someone watching. Either way, it reminded me fighting back ain't always about revenge. Sometimes it's just about doing what's right. But just as I sat down one morning with a fresh cup of coffee and a newspaper in my lap, Linda came rushing in with her phone. Greg, turn on the news. I did. And there it was, breaking. New Texas HOA president found tied to criminal syndicate connected to Chase investigation. My eyes narrowed. So it was bigger, and maybe it wasn't over after all. The headline blazed across the screen like a flare in the night. Texas HOA president linked to widespread criminal network. Ties to former inmate Ronnie Chase uncovered. I dropped the newspaper and leaned closer to the television. Linda stood beside me, arms wrapped tightly around herself. This is bigger than Oak Hollow, I murmured. According to the breaking report, the FBI had been running a parallel investigation. Apparently, Ronnie Chase hadn't been acting alone. He was part of a broader scheme, one that involved corrupt HOA officials in multiple states funneling money, exerting control over landowners, and using dirty tactics to silence those who wouldn't play along. The newly named president of a neighboring HOA, the Crescent Bluff Estates, had just been arrested. His name was Martin Lane, and he'd been caught funneling thousands in bribes and funding neighborhood security teams that operated like many militias. Ronnie Chase was the connective tissue, a fixer, a messenger, a hired gun for HOA cabals that wanted to dominate landowners across Texas and beyond. I turned to Linda. It wasn't just about me. My ranch was just the start. She looked up at me, her eyes wide. Do you think they're still watching us? I think they're watching everyone who said no. Within 48 hours, I was contacted by a DOJ task force. A tall, well-dressed agent named Agent Natalie Brooks showed up at my ranch with credentials, files, and a question. Mr. Miles, would you be willing to serve as an official witness in the federal inquiry? I invited her in. Linda served coffee, and we sat at the table where our entire lives had almost been destroyed. Agent Brooks laid it out clearly. We believe a network of HOA boards across the state, possibly even across the country, have been weaponized, fake citations, intimidation tactics, land seizures masked as compliance measures. Ronnie Chase was coordinating enforcement for multiple HOAs with shady finances. She showed me photos. Familiar faces, Deborah Cartwright, Martin Lane, even a woman I recognized from a real estate meeting years ago. They were all tied together. Your case, she said, is the first documented attempt at full-scale legal impersonation and personal attack coordinated by an HOA against a private citizen outside their jurisdiction. Of course, I'll help, I said, but this time, I'm not stopping at testimony. The next few weeks turned into a whirlwind. I was flown to Austin to give a deposition in front of a federal oversight panel. Sarah stood by me as my legal counsel, but I spoke plainly just like I always had. I told them what happened. I named every HOA official involved. I provided evidence, recordings, timestamps, witness statements. And when I finished, I added, if you don't act now, more innocent landowners, retirees, veterans, single parents, are going to be harassed into giving up their homes. You let these power-hungry HOA tyrants build empires behind closed doors. I'm asking you to tear the doors off the hinges." The room applauded. Back at home, things slowly returned to calm. Linda began gardening again. I went back to fixing the old tractor. Sherifield I visited more often, usually with a beer in one hand and jokes in the other. "You know," he said one night, "you really stirred up a hornet's nest." "I didn't stir it," I replied. "I smoked it out." He laughed. "Fair enough." Then one evening, something happened I never expected. A letter arrived, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a simple message. "I used to be afraid of my HOA. After watching what you did, I'm not anymore. Thank you." Beneath it were 37 signatures, all from people I'd never met. Folks from across the state, some from out of state, people who had seen the news, heard the story, or watched the courtroom clips go viral online. I felt something shift in my chest. This wasn't just my fight anymore. This was bigger. Weeks later, the final verdict came in. Ronnie Chase, 25 years without parole. Deborah Cartwright, 15 years with additional civil penalties totaling $850,000. Martin Lane, under federal indictment pending trial. And me. I was officially named a citizen legal advocate by the Texas State Bar Association, recognized for exposing systemic abuse and protecting constitutional rights. Sarah called and said, "Congratulations, you're famous again." I chuckled. "I didn't want fame, I wanted peace." "Yeah," she said. "But sometimes peace comes at the price of standing up." As summer rolled around, we hosted a cookout on the ranch. Neighbors, old and new, came with their families. Kids ran through sprinklers. We grilled ribs, played music, and toasted under the Texas sun. And at the edge of the field, where the barn once bore red letters of hate, we painted something new. A mural of a gavel crushing fake HOA badges underfoot. At the top in bold white letters, we wrote, "You don't own me," and below that, "Property, justice, freedom." To everyone watching this or reading my story, wherever you are in America, never let bullies hide behind titles. Never let fake authority steal your peace, and never, ever forget, sometimes the law wears a cowboy hat, and sometimes justice rides a tractor.